legend of Ape Canyon is a strange one indeed. A decades-old tale that has both mystified and terrified each generation. It all started in Washington State, 1924, where a group of prospectors had laid claim to mine the riches of Mount St. Helens. The men had worked tirelessly to build a camp on the eastern slope of the mountain, a modest log cabin that they would call home over the many hard days and dark, lonely nights ahead. Little did they know that a devil was watching. It was a warm July afternoon when the miners would soon cross paths with the creatures that stalked the forest. As he rounded a corner, two men spotted an enormous figure lurking behind a tree. They opened fire, but the mountain devil slipped away, seemingly unfazed by gunfire. The men would quickly return and warn the others. The story seemed unbelievable, but everyone agreed that they would keep their weapons close, just to be safe. However, it didn't take long before there was another encounter, but this time was different. Shot after shot rang out through the canyon, but the beast wouldn't back down. The others grabbed their rifles and rushed toward the sound of gunfire. Finally, overwhelmed by the hail of lead, the devil collapsed. The miners knew it was getting late and they wouldn't make it off the mountain before dark. It seemed they would have to endure one more night in the cabin. It was just after sunset and every man was quiet and alert. Their calloused hands gripped tight to their shotguns as they anxiously awaited the morning. Suddenly, something crashed against the cabin roof. They all rushed to the window, only to find their worst nightmare. The mountain devils had indeed returned. The canyon now erupted in a flurry of gunfire. Round after round blazed into the night, but the devil's attack only seemed to grow stronger. Large rocks battered the roof and shook the timbers as more and more devils besieged the cabin. And with every blast of buckshot, the miners were losing ground. It was then that they realized they might not survive to see the dawn.
The Ape Canyon story is really one of the classics of Bigfoot. I mean, it's one that everybody my age, at least, grew up with, watching on these schlockumentaries all throughout the 1970s.
Ape Canyon is one of those Bigfoot classics, one of those classic stories that everybody in Bigfootery knows. And honestly, most people in the Pacific Northwest who aren't interested in Bigfoot do know about the Ape Canyon incident.
I gotta think the first time that I heard of the Ape Canyon story was probably back in maybe the 70s. Probably it's one of the early Bigfoot-like movie documentaries out, Bigfoot Man and Beast or something like that.
When I first heard about the Ape Canyon story, I mean, I was probably literally 6 or 7 years old. And of course I believed it because I believed everything at 6 or 7 years old. But as I kind of grew up and matured and started examining the story more closely, well, it sounds so fantastic. It sounds so ridiculous. I think everybody probably has some sort of doubt that if the Ape Canyon events actually happened at all. I mean, when I started looking into it in 2010, 11, somewhere in there, I was just kind of digging around. It's like, well, the events, who knows if they actually happened? There's no cabin to support it, although there are rumors that the cabin did exist. There was no evidence of it, really. It was just a story, a story told by people who mostly were dead, or I think they're all dead at that point. You kind of just take these classic Bigfoot mythological stories, and I don't mean mythological as in fake and made up. I mean the stuff that forms the foundation of our early interests in the subject. And these are foundational stories that every Bigfooter knows about. Who knows if they're real?
Did this actually happen? Were these guys real? And people were asking, doubting even if Fred Beck existed, much less a cabin, much less a mine, much less being attacked by mountain devils. It's fascinating because there is a younger crowd, 30 and younger, who are here in the Pacific Northwest, Kelso Longview, who do not know the Ape Canyon story. So, it's waning a little bit, but basically everybody over 30 or 40 in the Pacific Northwest has heard this story in one version or another.
In the decades that have passed since the events of the Ape Canyon incident, much of the truth of the matter has been lost. Countless blogs and podcasts repeat facts that have been distorted through a centuries-long game of telephone. This mythologizing of the Ape Canyon story can be attributed to the lack of a custodian. With no one to keep the record straight, it slipped into a tall tale, making the arrival of Marc Myrsell all the more important.
So back in 2013, a good friend of mine, Craig Flippy, and I went kind of looking around Ape Canyon, just thinking, oh, maybe we can stumble across the cabin. We had no idea. We poked around for a few days, had a great backpacking trip, and of course didn't find the cabin or any sign or anything like that, but it was a great time. So when I got back, somebody reached out and said, hey, these guys are saying that they rediscovered the cabin site. I'm thinking, whoa, that's crazy. First of all, I doubt it because it's been lost for a long time. And second of all, I just got back from looking myself. But I said, well, I'm going to reach out. Maybe it's true. And by the end of the conversation, I was convinced that they very likely found the cabin site. And that was my first introduction to Marc Myrsell. Marc is my favorite Muppet. A lot of my friends, it turns out, are probably Muppets, ethnically Muppets. Certainly in their personality, they're Muppets. And Marc is probably the most Muppet of them all. I think he's about 6'3" tall or something. With his personality, he probably stands well over 7 feet. When I first met him, he was wearing a pork pie hat, and he's just mellow and cool, long hair and stuff. And once you start hanging out with him, you're like, oh man, this guy's awesome. He's one of my favorite humans on the planet. But really, that whole Muppet, I love the guy thing is really the first impression. And he leaves that first impression on a lot of different people. But I've known Marc for a long time now, over 10 years now. And the longer I know him, not only do I love the guy, he's adorable, he's super funny, he's loving, he's kind, he's soft-spoken, he's everything I like in a person. But he's legitimately one of the best researchers in any subject that I've ever met. His knowledge on the Ape Canyon events is encyclopedic. His efforts are tireless. He digs into the subject deep, and he continues to dig even deeper than anyone thought was possible.
So I'm Catherine Myrsell, and I am mainly an educator most of my life, about 30 plus years I've worked in education. So I consider myself the education director at the Westport Aquarium, and I'm also the wife of Marc Myrsell. When I was in college in Los Angeles, I joined the National Speleological Society, which is for cavers. My friend Bill Liebman said to me, he's like, did you know there are lint pickers at Carlsbad Caverns? And I'm like, whoa, that sounds really esoteric. I gotta figure this out. So I asked him more about it, and he said, yeah, they have camps every year, and it'd be fun, you should go. And that's where I met Marc. I loved him. He was awesome. From the very start, we just had really long conversations. We were just friends then, but when we first started, but we just could go on and talk for hours because we really had a lot of connections with loving nature and loving to get out caving and get outside, go hiking, whatever. And so we had that in common and kept talking, kept caving, and then ended up married at Carlsbad Caverns. It was awesome, 750 feet underground. They let us go into left-hand tunnel, which is a part of the cave that's not available to visitors usually, and let us have the wedding there. Marc has always done land surveying his whole life, and he's always been a caver, and we've always gone out in nature a lot. So I didn't think too much of it when he brought back some of the pictures and told me how steep it was, and I saw the rubble. I was like, that's a little worrisome. And of course, he went out at first by himself, which cavers' rule is always take 2 or 3 friends at least. And I was like, I think you should go with somebody and make sure you're safe.
My name's Brad Angus, and I'm a machinist.
How did you meet Marc?
I met Marc through the music. We play Irish pipes, and it's a type of bagpipe. And I met Marc. A bunch of pipers came over, and I met them all and had a gig and had to go.
My wife calls Brad the Cowardly Lion because he comes off really strong and really gravelly and, tends to offend people really easily. But honestly, he's probably the most warm-hearted, sweetest man I've ever met. And we've been the best of friends for coming on 30 years now or so.
Marc's wife wants me to go, because I asked Marc, I said, do you want me to go, or am I some kind of lump on a rock log? Oh, no, I want you to go. You're really great, and if there's something happens, we need you there. We all, so, and I'm not, I just like to go camping. I don't specifically need to be there to fulfill some Bigfoot or cabin, finding the cabin. I don't need to. We found it, so I'm not going to go there personally to look for the cabin. Mar is his thing, and if we find whatever, that's fine. It's just, to me, it's just stuff. There's stuff everywhere. There's stuff in this backyard you could find.
Were you comforted that Brad would go with Marc?
Yeah, actually, even though he's crazy. But I do think that he knows what he's doing. I think they get along well because they're both independent people. They sort of have their own independent thoughts, and they enjoy each other's company.
This house was built in the 1890s or so, and behind the house there was about 3 or 4 or 5 acres, and it was old orchards, cherry tree. I had my tree house, and it was pretty idyllic. It was really kind of idyllic growing up. I was up there in the upstairs bedroom where there are these two double windows up on the top on the side that we can see, and I was in there with a little black and white TV that it's about 1 a.m. after professional wrestling and after the news on KPTV channel 12. And it was a late show. For years I had forgotten the name of the movie, but I realize now that the movie was Sasquatch Legend of Bigfoot. I was like 8 or 9 years old. And Sasquatch, Legend of Bigfoot, had one of the seminal recreations, dramatizations of the Ape Canyon incident. And there was this dark, shadowy, silhouetted ridgetop with this shadowy, hair-covered creature throwing these rocks down onto the cabin. And it totally freaked me out. And that image of these monsters up on the hill I never forgot that image. So I was here for about 10 or 12 years, and honestly, this is where Ape Canyon started.
Almost everyone had read the report. 5 local Kelso men, Marion Smith, Dave Lefevre, Fred Beck, and John Smith, had an encounter with huge hairy men, and that their cabin was attacked during the night. Shots were fired, but seemingly to no avail. While many people scoffed at the story, there were those who thought it possible. And then there were those who wished to investigate further.
I tend to hang out in the lower depth regions of the Dewey Decimal System at the library. When you get into 001, that's when you get into the cool stuff of Bigfoot and UFOs and Atlantis and stuff. So I was browsing the aisles at Port Vancouver Library, and there I found one of Nick Redfern's books. It was called 3 Men Seeking Monsters. It's a great, great story. And later on in the book, he discusses Ape Canyon. I started researching it, document research as well as the newspaper research, and I found that there was this treasure trove of undisclosed information that had never really been brought out and gleaned out before. And frankly, in a way, it was my midlife crisis. It's like, what if there's some sort of evidence left behind of the cabin or the mine? What happened is that there was this core group headed by this guy, Marion Smith. But he grew up as a young man in the age of Pacific Northwest big timber, where there was lots and lots of lumber coming out of the mountains. And he had been in the area around St. Helens, Cowlitz County, Lewis County, a little bit of Clark County, working his entire life. Well, when he got into his 50s, he knew that there was gold coming off the mountains, which there is. A lot of volcanoes, because of their geologic makeup, you see a lot of quartz, see some copper, but you definitely see gold. And so in his 50s, he started going out and looking for gold. So in 1918, he and friends and family, core group basically was him, his son, Leroy Perry Smith, his son-in-law, Fred Beck, who married his daughter, Mabel, and a family friend named John Peterson, also a friend, August Johansson, and another friend, Mac Rhodes. And they start poking their way along the Lewis River east of Woodland, looking for a placer location. Eventually, in 1922, after 4 years of hunting and pecking, they went way north and established a claim for a gold mine in 1922. It's called the Vanderwhite Mine. How the Vanderwhite Mine got its name, I don't know, or I can't verify it with any kind of other documentation except what Fred said.
And it was in the afternoon, and I was feeling a little lonely. As I came around a curve in the trail, I met a very pleasant, beautiful young lady. A light-colored blanket was spread out, and she was sitting on it. It was a warm summer evening, and we held a pleasant conversation. I remember, her telling me how she liked the fresh air of the mountain and how she loved nature. And she would be talking on a subject, then pause and say, "Isn't that right, Dad?" And she said that several times. I did not see her father and never did see him.
The strange thing is that I've checked the deed record, I've checked the Polk City directory, all around Cowlitz County, all around Skamania County, all around Cowlitz County, or Clark County, and I've never found the name Vanderwhite in the deed record in city directories. Vanderwhite, the family name just didn't seem to exist. If these were real people that he encountered out there on the mountain, perhaps they were traveling from Seattle or someplace where I haven't checked for the name Vanderwhite. Anyway, so the mine was named the Vanderwhite Mine.
In 1922, we found the location of our mine. A spiritual being, a large Indian dressed in buckskin, appeared to us and talked to us. He never told us his name, but we always called him the Great Spirit. The big Indian being told us there would be a white arrow go before us. Another man who was not present during the attack in 1924 could see the arrow easily and clearly at all times, and I could see it nearly as well. So we started by the Lewis River, south of Mount St. Helens, and went up the Muddy River, and in all we followed the White Arrow 4 days. The going was slow, for in those days it was very rugged territory. Hank's temper was growing short as he climbed the hills, and he lost his temper, and he swore at the spirit leading us. Then just when he had started to calm down, we all saw the arrow soar up high, change direction, and swoop down. It hovered near the top of the north cliff of Ape Canyon. We got a little closer, and we all saw the image of a large door open, and the big Indian appeared in front of it. He spoke, "Because you have cursed the spirit leading you, you will be shown where there is gold, but it is not given to you." With those words, he disappeared. Then we saw the door slowly close. There was a huge lock and latch, but as the door shut, the lock did not latch. A closed door, but it was not locked. And that is just the way our gold mine turned out. Closed but not locked.
This is the only known reason as to why the miners began a mine where they did, which, speaking from personal experience, is one of the most dangerous and foolhardy locations to start a mine.
Working up there and staying up there year-round is not impossible, but you're not going to get anything done. Say your working window in the year is late May, early June, and then by Thanksgiving, you got to get out of there in November. There's just way too many snows up there. In theory, you could stay up there all year round, but in the wintertime, all you would be doing is surviving, much less trying to do anything else, like working a mine or whatever. So it's a small window. Dynamite was readily available at the time for logging and mining and other purposes. You can just go to the hardware store and get a box of dynamite. So they blasted out a shelf and they started digging in. With blasting, with hand tools, I understand that when it stopped, the mine had gotten in there about 75 feet or so. So they're working the mine. 1922 and 1923. You know, this was not a full-time commercial operation. They were still working their regular jobs, mainly mill jobs and that kind of thing. So they'd just go up there when they had time through the summer and fall. So they were just tent camping, coming back up every day. They had built a ladder very close to the mine to get down the cliff a little bit. And every single year at the end of the working season, they had to pack up camp and haul everything back. So, hey, let's build a cabin that's going to hold our stores, maybe a little bit of food or something like that to last through the winter. So when we come back in spring, we're ready to work the mine again. Let's build a cabin right by the mine.
And during the time that they were doing this, they had some sightings of what they termed as apes on the mountain, and they also had found at least one set of tracks or a track in the area. And there was some discussion about what to do about this.
The miners heard a few strange things. They would hear a high-pitched whistling from one of the ridges up near the camp. And then things would go quiet. And then there would be an answering whistling call from another ridge, and it'd go back and forth, back and forth. Also, Marion Smith said that he had heard this deep thumping sound coming from somewhere, but it was so low in decibel range, so bass, that he couldn't really tell where it was coming from. And he thought it was his friends, miners, playing a trick on him, until he saw everyone in a group together and he heard it and he realized it wasn't them. I've heard that sound myself up there on Mount St. Helens. I don't know what it is. There's plenty of lava tubes and water running underneath the basalt. So I always thought it was some sort of hydraulic action, some sort of thumping, that you get in water pipes or whatever. They're still gold. So when they came back in the spring of 24, let's build a cabin. It was 10 by 20. And it's not until you look at this new picture that we just acquired that really gives you an idea of the immensity of this cabin and the immensity of the trees that they had used just to build this cabin strictly by hand, maybe with block and tackle. I don't know, but it was a formidable cabin. They intended to make a formidable cabin to withstand the snows, and that's what they did. Just before the 4th of July, Fred and Marion are going to the spring to collect water. And the spring is maybe about 100 feet north on the butte. And when they get to the spring site,
they saw a mountain ape there, about 300 feet away, standing behind a tree and peeking out at them. Beck then took his rifle and fired 3 rounds into the creature.
Whether he hit it or not, I don't know. It ran off, and he went back to the others who all come out because they heard the shots, and they were discussing these creatures, and they had decided that, well, they better not go out unarmed at this point because they didn't really know what the intentions were or what these things were.
A few days passed.
The guys are in the mine, working the mine. Leroy's in charge of going to the spring, and here's some rustling in the brush behind him, turns around, and this big thing starts coming out of the brush at him. So Leroy had his gun with him, takes shots into the creature. This is only like 50 feet away, and it seems unaffected. The creature turns, goes back into the brush. Next day on Thursday, July the 10th, same thing happens. This is getting close to the end of the day. Everybody's in the cabin. Leroy goes to the spring, gets water. Creature comes out again, and he takes 1 shot into the creature. The guys inside hear it. They come boiling out of the cabin and start shooting at the creature. Marion had estimated that there were 16 rounds between all of them that went into this creature. Fred took the last shot while the individual was at the top of the cliff. The creature either crouched down and climbed down into the canyon or fell down into the canyon. Let's get the hell out of here. This is nuts. I don't care how much gold is in that mine. We need to get the hell out of here in the morning. Everyone agrees.
We got towards evening, and when they went to bed in the cabin that night after it got dark,
there's this large impact on the cabin that knocks out one of the split log chinkings between the logs. They all luck out through the hole, and they can see 6 or 7 of these large creatures dancing around the cabin, and all hell breaks loose.
The creatures were throwing rocks. They were climbing on top of the cabin. They were digging underneath the cabin. They're beating at the door.
At one point, I believe there was talk of a double-bitted axe, that one of the creatures reached through the chinking and grabbed the axe and was pulling it out, and one of the miners, I believe, turned the axe so that it couldn't be pulled out, and then there was some shooting, and that this attack kind of went on basically all night. And that in the morning, when it got light, it had stopped, and they had decided that that's it, we're out of here. They packed up just the minimal stuff they had, left their ore, and hightailed it out of there.
There's large rocks scattered everywhere. There's footprints, large human-like footprints, 13, 14, 15 inches long everywhere.
Seeing all the wreckage, they decided that they needed to leave immediately. They only brought their essentials with them, and began walking back to their car, 6 miles away. But before leaving, they talked to the forest ranger stationed there.
Bill Welch and his wife Wilma, they actually encountered Wilma first. So they talked to Wilma. We got to talk to Bill because we were attacked all night. Bill was in the barn and he sees this scraggly, weird old guy on his front porch, and he comes out worried about his wife. Oh, it's Marion. Marion says, Bill, we got one. What'd you get? A mountain devil. And they're like, okay, whatever, Marion. And Marion goes to his truck, and the other guys had already loaded in. Bill follows them, and Bill said that in an interview in the 1960s, that he had never seen a group of men more shaken and scared in his life when he looked in that truck. They were as white as sheets, and there was something wrong, something very wrong that had happened.
And at this point, they headed back to Kelso, where they were from, and they went to the Blue Ox Tavern. And the Blue Ox Saloon was owned by a fellow named William Secor. And I got this part of the story because a friend of the family who was from Kelso, his father was working in the tavern or the saloon for William Secor when the miners came in. And he had related the story that he believed them because they were very obviously scared, even at this point. And that it was quite a journey from the mine to Kelso, but he said they were very visibly scared. And my understanding is on the way, they had decided that they weren't going to tell anybody about what happened because they were afraid of ridicule, but they got the tavern, they started drinking, things started going, and one of them slipped out, and the story kind of came out, and pretty quickly questions were starting to get asked, and it kind of exploded from there, and then newspaper people got involved, and I guess it went kind of national.
In the decades after, Fred Beck became the face of the Ape Canyon story, giving interviews to researchers like Roger Patterson and John Green. In the 1960s, he released a book titled I Fought the Ape Men of Mount St. Helens, co-authored by his son Ronald Beck. For all intents and purposes, Fred Beck became synonymous with Ape Canyon.
Many, many years later, in fact, decades later, Fred Beck eventually told his story to his son Ronald, who wrote the story down and published a book. It's really more of a long pamphlet, but it's basically a book about those events. Of course, at that time, I think it was in the late 1960s when this was actually penned, Fred Beck had gotten into spiritualism and a lot of weird stuff. So he introduced a lot of weird stuff to the story, but again, that was decades later.
Later on in life, Fred Beck was known to be somewhat of a faith healer and conduct seances regularly at his house. There was ectoplasm and there were chairs and tables floating all around. And I find it kind of interesting that he was doing this for a couple of reasons. One, directly after the attack, there were a lot of explain it away theories about how this attack by mountain devils, by Sasquatch on the cabin, couldn't have possibly have happened. One of them was, say, they were moonshiners and they were drunk. Another one was that they were spiritualists and they were conducting seances. And either one, my joke is that, yeah, I like to drink beer and wine, and I've messed around with a Ouija board, but at no point did I think my house was being attacked by large hair-covered creatures. So it's kind of a strange thing to say. Marion and Fred did respond to say, no, we're not spiritualists in 1924. We have attended a few seances, but we're not spiritualists. But apparently, 40 years later, Fred was. He was conducting, seances and stuff at his house.
So I started to do a little bit of kind of investigation into that. And during that, I also read Ronald Beck's book, Fought the Ape Man of St. Helens, trying to gain a little information. Well, interestingly enough, why I was doing this, I was working with a fellow named Steve Beck. Fred Beck was like his great uncle. So he put me in contact with some of his relatives in Kelso, where I got Ronald Beck's number. And I called Ron to discuss the mine and the book and what he knew about the location of the mine. And Ronald was a very interesting guy. He was getting up there in age a little bit. He really wanted to talk about his father more than the mine. Ronald was into kind of a new wave religion type thing a little bit. And he really considered his dad a clairvoyant. He claimed that his father was like Edward Casey. He kept comparing him to Edward Casey, and he had visions and sights of things and was able to foresee the future. The book was really written by Ronald as an interpretation of Fred's story. And he did say that, he had enhanced some things to make it more interesting, and like the size of the rocks being thrown at the cabin weren't like these big boulders. Most of them were softball size, and that some of the mystical parts of it were how he believed his dad perceived things. So I kind of was questioning and pinning down, well, was this what your dad was saying or what you were interpreting? And he did admit most of it was his interpretation. His dad really wasn't saying some of these things.
So when one reads I Fought the Ape Man in Mount St. Helens, the first half of the book deals with the Ape Canyon story. The second half is more proselytizing about the cosmos and how we are on spiritual evolutionary planes and everything. When you take that book, published in 1967, and you compare that with some of the interviews that were conducted with Fred Beck, my opinion, you can tell Fred Beck did not write that book. He helped write that book, but truly it was Ronald Beck, his son, who thought that Fred was a clairvoyant and had true powers, and of whatever those powers were, but he had extrasensory, perhaps supernatural powers. It was Ronald, basically, who lended that voice to I Fought the Ape Man in Mount St. Helens.
Historians always look at primary sources. For me, a Bigfoot historian, I'm always looking at casts, what's written on the back, because you can't get more primary than that. Or what the witness said the day after the observation of the Sasquatch, that kind of thing. Get as close as you possibly can to the event through primary sources. And that's what was done back in the 1920s, in 1924, right after the Ape Canyon events. So yeah, Fred Beck told the story and it was written down by another person decades and decades and decades later, and I'm sure there's a lot of truth in there. But if you really want to know what happened, you got to look at what happened closest to the events.
So Brad calls this the football. My mom got it for my dad when I was a kid. There used to be a handle on it. And my dad was never like a briefcase kind of guy, so it sat around forever. And I just got it from Dad. And anyway, this is the OG Ape Canyon file that has most of the material in it. And that's why it's all torn up and the handle's falling off. And I'm too damn sentimental about it to transfer it to any other container or whatever. I might do it originally. But all of this is interviews, published interviews, a lot of newspapers, that kind of thing. This is a trip because Longview Daily News, Kelso miners back with tale of mountain devils. And the article goes on to describe what had happened. And a reporter gets the story, tracks down the miners, talks to them about it, and then this gets published. This gets published about 48 hours after the attack. It was that quick, right? It was just amazing, much less typesetting and putting it in the printing press and publishing it. At the time, the Associated Press wire, the AP wire, was pretty darn new, but it obviously worked because it hit this and it spread like wildfire all over the West. So I found it in St. Louis, I found it down south, I think in the LA Times, found it up in northern Washington. So it spread like crazy. They carried this whole story for many days. We're up, about a week or two. That was front page news. You go back further on in the newspaper, and there's a short little paragraph. YMCA boys stage hike. The YMCA had a boys camp at Spirit Lake. Every year, it's a tradition. Spirit Lake, they would hike up 6 miles to Pumice Butte, which is at the head of Ape Canyon, and then spend the night and then hike back, right? And so right after the attack, about a week or two later, there's this Boys Explain Hoax of Ape Canyon. And this was a letter to the editor from the father of one of the YMCA boys. And the father wrote to the editor and said, look, I talked to my son. He was at YMCA boys camp, and he confessed to me it was he and 2 friends. They're the ones who attacked the cabin and threw rocks at it. The reason why is because the YMCA boys were there. They found the cabin. The miners got mad, brandished their rifles, and hey, you punks, get out of here. The boys say that they snuck back out at night and threw rocks on top of the cabin, right? But the fascinating thing is that on the 13th, way back in there, there's that little blurb of YMCA boys stage hike to Pumice Butte. It said that there were about 60 campers. They went to the base of Pumice Butte. They went up on Wednesday. They left Thursday morning and were all back at Spirit Lake, 6 miles away, on Thursday morning. The night of the attack was Thursday night, July the 10th. We have this little blurb that says, no, they were all back in camp. So if these boys really did perpetuate the whole attack on that cabin, what would have happened? They would have had to do bed check, get up without being found, sneak out, hike 6 miles up to Pumice Butte, go up the butte and down to the cabin and throw rocks on top of the cabin and get back into bed before they were seen missing or anything. It's a ridiculous idea. But my theory is that if the boys really did perpetuate the attack, the real story that we would have heard was a group of miners getting arrested for taking pot shots at a group of 14-year-old kids. But that's not the story that we got. The real story was Kelso miners back the tail of Mountain Devils. So anyway, information on paper. And this is how the entire story got built, starting like around 2002, 2004 is when I started looking at it.
All right, back in 2004, Mark, I was over here at like 1 o'clock in the morning hanging out.
Yeah.
Mark starts the conversation of Ape Canyon and all the this and that about it. So then...
Yeah, you were like, what's that?
Well, what's that? I kind of... you were like exercising my memory brain, so... And then you went and got a few charts and maps and pulled it out, and we looked on the table. And, okay, let's go camping. When do you want to go camping? I'll go next weekend because I just want to go camping,
It's like, are you ready? You're like, I'm always ready, dude.
I'm always ready. Let's go. Let's get in 2013, finally, we go.
Yeah. I had gone up like 3 or 4 times before that, but it was just day trips, and which is a real pain in the butt. But yeah, that was the first time where we did the overnight, and there were 5 of us, but it was you and me and 3 other.
So I'm in the front, and I just went up the trail, and then I stop, and I hear people talking.
Off trail in the woods.
And Mark comes up behind me. He says, "What's up?" I said, "Shh." I said, "What is that?" And he says, "What's that?" I says, "I don't know, homeless people." So then we dropped the packs. where we're gonna camp. I'm gonna go over there to the ice sheet and get me some water. And then Mark joined me later, and we're sitting down in this little trickle, getting water, talking about this or that. And then we walked back to our gear, and I found this big footprint. And I says, dude, come here, check this out. He comes over, he's like, ah. And he says, did you just find that? I said, yeah. He says, did you bring plaster? I said, no, I brought water and food. I said, did you bring plaster? He says, no. I said, just wait here, don't touch it. Let me go get my Louise.
That's right.
Let me get Louise's camera. And we're taking pictures with, putting things next to the footprint to get a perspective of the thing, idea.
Well, scale, yeah.
Scale. And then instantly, I don't think we should be here. I think we should go.
It was weird because I remember it so clearly. You and I just standing there looking down at this thing.
What the hell's this?
I don't know what it was, man.
And then at night, it got really cold, and we were hanging out. And I hear what sounds like two, I would say, Hell's Angels. This is what's going through my guys having an argument out beyond where I am, down this slope. So I go out, I put the light, I'm looking for light or shine or animal or what some people are out there having an argument, and nothing.
Yeah.
So I go back in and it starts up again. And I just basically, I'm listening to this all night until the sun started illuminating, and you don't see the sun, but it's still illuminating. I got up, look around, and wait for the zipper to unzip on this Hello Kitty tent.
Yeah, I know.
It's his daughter's tent.
Yeah.
I told you what happened.
Yeah.
And I think we should go. Something's up here.
You were starting to get keyed up, man.
Well, I don't know what's going. What the hell?
I know, right?
So then that day, I stayed there.
Yeah. All of us went up to the top of the butte, and you go up to the top of the butte. It's like a couple hundred feet, and that's where you're like, okay, I'm going to go down. We're going to go look for the cabin, right? So the three of you were like, no, I'm not going to do it. So it's just me and Gabe who went down. That's when we found the foundation. That's when we found the spoon and the foundation and the nails and all the bent wire and all that kind of jazz. Okay, what does Gabriel tell me have for breakfast? He has Ape Canyon. Okay, we just found this spoon. Oh man, a spoon. Dig it. Haha, with a spoon. What a trip. Isn't that incredible? This is on the cut bank where I first found that nail. And then in the same spot, I found these other nails. There's the wire I found before. I think we found it. It was mainly the Oregonian photo. Pretty grainy. But you can see in the foreground, in front of the cabin, the stumps of the trees that the miners cut down in order to build the cabin. Two things going on. I was able to contact the head archaeologist for the Gifford-Pinchot National Forest. He did confirm that area had never been commercially logged, which makes a lot of sense. There aren't a lot of marketable trees down there. The other thing that's going on is that when a tree is damaged, either with a branch or a blaze, or even when it's cut, the very first thing that happens is that the tree starts bleeding sap in order to try to preserve itself, right? My point being is that stumps can last in the woods a very, very long time because of the natural preservative of sap. I knew that if I could find some stumps, I knew I would be close because it had never been logged. So I started looking, and in 2013, we found a rotten stump. We found another rotten stump. We found another rotten stump. Break out the metal detector, and we found the foundation. We found a spoon that they left behind. We found a piece of bent baling wire, found nails and the foundation log about 6 inches underground with the nails still driven into it. So that's the basics of how the cabin was found.
I was personally over the moon that cabin site had been rediscovered. And I really wanted to see, like, is this true? I mean, how do we know? He had baling wire and some nails and a spoon or something like that. The artifacts themselves, upon closer scrutiny, have really solidified that it is beyond any shadow of any doubt that Marc did in fact rediscover the Ape Canyon cabin. These artifacts, some of them are pretty nondescript, like spoons and broken saws, things that you would expect miners or campers even to have. But a couple of these artifacts are 100% representative of the cabin. These are extraordinary artifacts that remove all doubt of Marc's accomplishments. And I am beyond thrilled to be able to exhibit those in the North American Bigfoot Center as part of our Ape Canyon exhibit.
Well, the reason why we decided to do this here at the museum is to display these artifacts here is because, you know, you and I both knew that the 100th-year anniversary was coming up, and it was certainly time the world to know. And what better venue than the North American Bigfoot Center?
Yeah,
and
on the centennial.
On the 100th anniversary, absolutely, on the centennial. And that's why you and I did this.
Yeah.
So I decided what was good, what wasn't good for the museum, and certainly it was the bigger stuff. There was the spoon that I first found in 2013, and the baling wire was the first thing I found, and then the broken saw blade right at the cabin site that I found in 2014. And the good thing about correlating this with the new photos that we have just received is that you can see the stump in the photos that were taken in 1924 of the trees that were used to build the cabin. And in one of those photos, you can see the stump, and that's exactly where I found the saw blade.
So. Well, and of course, the baling wire, that removes all doubt. That is the key to all this, I think.
I think you're right. And the crazy thing is that I found that baling wire right near the cabin site. And it wasn't until a year ago, or maybe 2 years ago, that I was looking at a photo that was published in one of the Bigfoot books. I was like, wait a minute. So when you look at this and you look at the photo that showed up in Chris Murphy's book.
There it is.
There it is, right there.
That angle.
I had always assumed that it was used to bale something together. But no, it was used to hang their coffee pot.
Yeah.
It was right over the spit where their fire was down here.
You just follow the curve, like that right here, going up and over, down, and then it wiggles a little bit in a straight line, which is right here.
Right
and it's been a little twisted up over time.
Yeah.
But
yeah,
that is this.
Yes, and this photo was taken inside the cabin almost to the day of 1 week after the attack.
To me, it's like holding Abe Lincoln's hat, you know, or George Washington's teeth or something like that, but cooler.
Yes, right, exactly.
Yeah, but cooler and more historically important in some ways.
Exactly. And the thing is as of last year, you and I have gotten to know the great-grandsons of the guy who twisted it and cooked his beans
Unbelievable.
On the fire.
Unbelievable. But you know, this speaks to something that I think is really important, is that history wasn't that long ago. And that's something that we kind of forget because we're removed from history in some ways because we see it on television or the internet or books or something like that. But it is right there. And if you go looking for it, sometimes it's actually in your hands.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
One of the challenges of historical research is that the witnesses are often deceased. Yet with a story like Ape Canyon having happened in relatively recent history, there might be descendants who could offer more details.
So who was your dad?
Leroy Smith.
And who was his dad?
His dad was Marion Smith.
Right.
Yeah.
So what year were you born?
1947.
1947.
Thanks for aging me.
All right. Can you tell me what kind of person your dad was that you remember? What was he like?
You're gonna make me cry.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Sorry.
That's okay.
Well, settle myself down. He was the best that anybody could ever ask for.
Yeah.
Good, honest, hardworking. He had to work. He only went through the eighth grade, and so he had to work on the farm. Yeah, they had a dairy farm out in Lexington. And so he never really got a big education. And then when he was young, he married somebody briefly, and then my mother, and then we got adopted, my brother and I. And so he was 42, I think, when I got adopted. But I couldn't ask for a better dad. You know, he was just wonderful. We did a lot together, and we're always doing something together outside, gardening, picking apples, whatever, you know, riding horses, fishing, vacationing. We had a lot of family vacations. So he was my best friend, and I had really good fathers, and we always talked about how good, you know, they both were. So yeah, we had it all.
Have you heard about the 1924 Ape Canyon story?
No, not until you told me. So, no.
Your dad never talked about it afterwards? Never told you?
Never told me a bit about it.
Okay.
I don't know, it was kind of shocking to hear about it so much later, and he never told me. That is the shock coming from him, the only thing I can ever think of that he would have done that I wouldn't have known. Yeah, I really was amazed, but he didn't tell me. But I don't know, he had his reasons, you know. So then I just want to know more and more, you know.
Your family.
Listening, yeah.
My main goal at the time was to try to track down the family stories and try to track down the descendants of the miners. Fortunately, the youngest of the miners, Leroy Perry Smith, his daughter and his son are still alive. So what I did, I tracked his obituary down, and his daughter was named as Betty Mitchell. I found Betty Mitchell's phone number through a little bit of research, and I called her. And since then, she has become enthralled, of course, with her family history, but also because of the Ape Canyon incident. Everyone growing up in Kelso Longview knew about the Ape Canyon incident because it was part of the local story. She knew about it, but she didn't know that that was her family story until I told her. And that is one of the heaviest parts. The good part about it is that Betty, because of her understanding of her connection to Ape Canyon, has shared that story with her son and with her grandsons. And that's how I got to know the grandsons of the Mitchell family, who have become part of the Ape Canyon story as well.
What did you think of Marc when you first met him?
Goofball. 10 out of 10 goofball, and that is the absolute most confidence in becoming friends with him, because, you know, it's hard for me to keep a straight face just sitting here. We're both long-haired hippie freaks.
Well, I first heard about you from someone telling me that you've got a binder on me. I wanted to figure out who the hell had a binder on me and my family and figure out what information is and who has it. But gave you a call and you talked to me about it, told me about it. I was like, all right. Figured out you weren't a Fed, so there went most of the concerns. But after that, no, I mean, we had our little talks about, what is kind of the goal of all of this, especially if it's, family stuff, what's the whole reasoning behind it. But then after we met you and saw how excited you were just for the story, everything melted away, didn't really worry.
Had you heard of the Ape Canyon story before Mark and all that?
I don't think so. I remember when my grandma found out about it, I don't know if she did a little digging or if you gave them to her, but there was the little books that I Fought the Ape Men at Mount St. Helens, and my dad had it in his truck, and I was like, what is that?
And then she starts talking about the Bigfoot story and blah, 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 and, we kind of wrote it off for a while and didn't take it seriously enough until we did, and we finally started reading those books you were lending her and look at one thing up on the internet and it's like, whoa, this isn't just a Bigfoot story. This is the Bigfoot story, and it's in our backyard.
So while Mark discovered the cabin in 2013, there was still one thing missing that was plaguing him: the location of the mine.
First time we went out, it was just my brother and I. That was the unsuccessful trip. We did not bring enough rope. But it was nice to get out there and just kind of lay eyes on the land and kind of make our assumptions about where it may or may not be. So that was at least nice. And then we got back home. I think it was at our cousin's wedding where Jake kind of expressed interest in going, and so we were like, all right, round 2, let's go. And it was with him that we were able to find it, and maybe it's just that extra little bit of motivation, having someone else to string along in the madness.
We didn't really know what we were looking for, I guess. With your instructions, we stumbled right across the cabin site, and we didn't even know that we were there. And once we figured out, okay, this has got to be it, this is the spot, we started looking around from there, started going down the hill the wrong way.
Well, we'll do a quick little video. I got pictures I'll show later, but we found the cabin site, and we believe we are headed to the mine right now. Jake's down this rope. We're going to follow that down over to the cliff, and we believe the mine should just be right over the edge.
Kind of started working our way down the hill and stumbled across it, and I couldn't believe it when I saw it.
Undoubtedly, when you first walk up on it and you see that hole in the ground, it's one of the, you kind of like double take, like, yeah, that's man-made. This is it. I mean, it unmistakably couldn't be anything else. I even had my own self-doubts multiple times, and I've had to go back and look at the pictures and be like, yeah, no, that's it. I mean, no question. You can see what I believe are the drill marks where they put the dynamite in to blast the side off, and you can see the tool marks in the ceiling, and just all of it, man. It's wild. It unmistakably couldn't be anything else.
Well, no, now we found the mine. So it's just, I don't know, it's surprising to me. Exciting.
Exciting is an understatement. I mean, I kind of took my words away.
With the discovery of the mine and the 100-year anniversary of the actual incident looming, it felt like the perfect time to make this film. So on July 10th, 2024, Mark, Brad, Braden, and Jared Mitchell, myself, and my friend Tyler Hall descended into the canyon.
Going up to the mountain, you have to be well prepared. It's about 5.5 miles from the car park up to the head of Ape Canyon. Very rarely is there water on the trail. There's no water until you get up to the top. And then getting to the cabin site, I can't recommend strongly for everybody not to do it. It's like, the old adage, do as I say, not what I do. It is going up Pumice Butte and then down. And even though the site is only about less than a quarter mile horizontally from the trail, the site conditions make it obvious of why the cabin and the mine have been lost all of these decades, because it's incredibly dangerous to get to.
Probably one of the most dangerous terrains that I have traversed in my life, easily top 2. All of the rocks you're walking on are all cracked unilaterally. They fall apart in your hands as you're climbing on them. I mean, there's pumice stones and ash everywhere, so you're slipping and sliding.
I couldn't imagine being up there looking for a place and look down and think, yeah, we'll go there, and then get a quarter of the way down and be like, this is still a good idea. Get close and be like, yeah, I still want to go. It just doesn't really make sense to me, but they probably knew something I didn't.
When I was standing at the top of Pumice Butte and looking down into the canyon, I couldn't help but think about how Marc's first few trips to the cabin site he accomplished without ropes. That was the moment I knew Marc was actually insane.
Marc is crazy for a lot of reasons, not the least of which is that he actually found the cabin without ropes. That's insane. That's insane. Even with ropes, it's super sketchy. It's extraordinarily dangerous, and it would be very easy to die. 1 or 2 missteps, and you're not coming out of there. There's a fine line between insanity and genius, and Marc is riding a wheelie on the edge of that line all the time.
The first time in 2011, going up Pumice Butte and going down to find any evidence of the cabin site was probably the most difficult, because I didn't know exactly what I was looking for. And Pumice Butte is incredibly dangerous. And to go from one point over 50, 100 feet takes like an hour. You're always tempting fate every step that you take, where one wrong move and you're going to be dead at the bottom of the canyon. I think it was on my second or third trip, I went down the wrong way, and yeah, my feet came out from under me and I slid like a good 200 feet or so headed towards the cabin. Fortunately, I was able to grab something, obviously, because I'm alive. I was sure at the time it was lights out. I could have been one of the other Ape Canyon stories of the Ape Canyon cabin hunter who was lost and they had to retrieve his body 2 weeks later, or his body was never found. That could have easily been me in 2013. So this is the Oregonian, photos out of the Oregonian that Jack Gregory took. These are the only photos that we have of this because I can't find the originals yet. This was published on July 19th. And I believe that where we're sitting now is where Gregory took this photo of the ladder that the miners built. The miners had come down the way we came down so far with ropes, and then they cut over to this ladder that they had built out of small trees and fir boughs. It was reported to be about 30 feet long. So there's Charles Dunbar on the ladder, and it says in the caption, barely see it, there's silhouetted here is a sun leaning up against this tree. This tree, to me, silhouetted, looks like the tree is alive. And so I tend to think that this tree shown in the photo with the sun leaning up against it is that snag up there. The other thing that's indicative too is that if you trace out this ridge line that's also shown in the photo at the top of the ladder, it sort of matches the existing topography. Now, a lot of this basalt had spalled off with the earthquakes associated with the 1980 eruption, so it's not exactly the same. When we get to the cabin, I'll talk about that as well, about how the topography has changed a little bit. But this is the best fit, and I tend to think that site up there is where the ladder went down. It's about 30 feet to the bottom, and then bam, you go through it, which is the way we're going to be traveling to the cabin site.
The cabin site is not what you would expect. At this point in time, it is just the side of a mountain. In order to build the cabin, the miners blasted a shelf into the side of the canyon. But after 100 years, that shelf no longer exists. So, as I sat down, I asked Marc where the cabin was, and he replied, "You're sitting on it."
So here we are at the cabin site. When you're out here, you can look around, and what you're dealing with, there's rocks and trees and vine maple. You'd walk right across it without even knowing it was here. 50, 60 years ago, it was said that the cabin was just kind of falling in on itself from disuse. This area gets like 7 or 8 feet worth of snow every year, which is also a testimony about why the miners can't stay here year round to work the mine. They had to get out of here by November. Now, the thing about the foundation, it's disappeared a lot over the past 10 years, but the issue is that they were building a log cabin. And when they were building the log cabin, the way you built a log cabin at the time is you would lay down a log. You need to lay another log on top of it. So in order to kind of cradle that log while you're building the cabin, you would put nails diagonally into the side of the log, and then that would temporarily give a place for you to put the next log. So you're able to find the corner of the foundation with the nails still driven into it, where you grab the nail, you pull it out, and you're pulling out rotten wood. So we found all that stuff in 2013. This site is a historical resource now under the federal government. It was designated as an historical resource around 1977 when they were doing a resource survey. They added it to their list, even though the Forest Service didn't know where it was, but they added it to their list so that when the cabin was found, it would be automatically registered as an historic resource. So 2 things: there's no digging allowed on the monument, but also because it's a historical resource, there's no digging allowed now for it. So let me run my metal detector over the foundation. You can hear all the nails and stuff in there. The high pitch is a hit on the signal for a metal. So what you can see is that there's a lot of metal out here, which are nails and hardware from the cabin. And if someone wants to finance a full-scale archaeological study, go for it. I'll help them out. But last time I checked, I called around to some archaeologists, checked with the Forest Service, and a full-scale retrieval by a licensed archaeologist runs about 30 to 40 grand, which I don't have. So I found the site, and I'll let someone else do the archaeological dig. So we are, I'm going to estimate, about 25, 30 feet east of the cabin site. And behind me is a very, very large Douglas fir. The miners and the reporters gave us very few clues about where the mine and the cabin were. But in the mining location notice filed in 1922, the miners did note that at the time the cabin wasn't built in 22. But what the miners did say is that the mining location notice, which was a large wooden sign nailed to a tree, about 80 feet north and about 30 feet above the mine. So you can see by the size of this tree that it's been here a lot longer than 1924, and thereby surviving the eruption. Also lending corroborative evidence of the USGS report that said the east side of Pumice Butte had hardly been affected by the eruption. So we got down here. I think I first found some of the cabin site and then noticed this tree. Rod Beck, Fred Beck's grandson, also said that in the early 70s he had found pitons nailed to the base of the tree where the miners had threaded ropes through to maybe pull stuff up or let themselves down to the mine. So there's nothing to do except to see if there's anything there. Whatever's in there is probably not very big, metal-wise, and it's probably deeply buried, but there's something in there. So whatever I'm finding up in here, I can only figure are nails of the sign where they nailed their claim notice. Down here, I'm probably hearing some sort of hardware or pitons that they may have driven in. But I'm certain that this is the original claim tree. We were at the cabin site. And we were about to rope up and get down to the mine. And we decided to have one more talk. And Mark, go stand by the big claim tree. And I'm standing by the tree. And Tyler's sitting there with one of the cameras. And he's setting up a shot to me to talk about the mine and talk about the cabin. And there's a piece of vine maple in his way. And Tyler's like a very enthusiastic, very, high metabolism guy, and he's outdoorsman, and he's always prepared. And this vine maple was in the way, and this vine maple is only about maybe an inch at the most in diameter. And then we're trying to pull it away to get it out of his shot. And Tyler, gets frustrated. He's like, to hell with it. And so he takes out his knife.
Then the knife slipped.
And at first, Tyler was like, oh, geez, ouch, oh, golly. And then he takes his hand away to see how bad it is. And I'm 5 feet away from him. And when he takes his hand away, it starts squirt, squirt.
Tyler just goes, Eli, you need to put your knee on my arm right now. And so I go over and I put my knee on his arm. We're trying to get a tourniquet. We put a tourniquet on, and the tourniquet breaks, which I think Jared filmed. And I remember that moment thinking, like, Tyler's gonna die.
This is really, really, really bad.
We were all on edge. There's no cell service in the canyon itself. Luckily, Jared did have a satellite phone, which he used to call emergency services. But they told us that they weren't going to come down for Tyler. And when we heard that, it really hit. We were on our own.
Ape Canyon's no f***ing joke, and accidents can be the death of you, so don't be an idiot and cut towards you.
I'm like, okay, Braden, Jared, you're the fastest. Get Tyler to the top right now. And so they get him up to the top.
Well, here we are, ascending Ape Canyon, trying not to die on the way out. Jared,
Tyler went to the hospital and got 8 stitches in his arm. He ended up fully recovering and healing up fine. But that was an extremely stressful and scary moment. The whole situation serves as a reminder of the unthought of dangers of traveling to a hard-to-reach location like Ape Canyon, where the immediate presence of something like slipping and falling is ever present. Something as simple as cutting a branch can lead to a life-threatening situation. And it is these things that cause worry in the hearts of those near to fearless explorers.
Well, of course I worry sometimes, and, just the way that anybody would, because you are often not in cell phone range, which can also be a blessing sometimes. But just, if there's an emergency, you want to make sure you have competent people together that can help each other. And, it is a challenge. And thinking about this, I thought, really, a lot of us hardly ever go more than a quarter mile away from our cars, right? Or away from a road or a city. We're constantly barraged by computer screens, phone screens. It kind of desensitizes our natural instincts, but we forget that, right? We're like in this kind of TV world. And when you get beyond where you can hear the cars, I think an instinct kicks in you, which it's almost otherworldly. It feels supernatural in a way.
It's got, if you're gonna go camping, it's kind of more extreme than usual camping. And it's also got some adventure, perhaps, if you want to be doing that. You can go look down ropes and things and look for not just climbing a cliff, but to actually have a destination to a place that has some story and lore behind it,
Shortly after coming down from the mountain, Brad hatched an idea of a gift for Tyler.
Close your eyes. Frankie, what are you doing?
Close your eyes, Tyler.
Who,
me?
Yeah.
Why?
You. Just do it.
Oh,
shit. What the is this?
We're not gonna squirt you or spray you or
Just keep your eyes
Keep your eyes
closed.
closed. Okay. I'm gonna move your coffee mug down. Okay, keep the eyes closed, but put your hands out and touch this. Okay, what this is? Yeah. What do you think's in this box? Don't shake it. Just.
If it's an animal, I can't have it. Can I open my eyes?
Yeah.
Oh, it's like a shadow box. Holy shit!
That's for you.
Oh my god!
You take home.
Did you make this?
Yesterday.
Holy shit, dude! That is badass.
And you could add to it or whatever you want.
Dude, did you guys see this already?
Yeah. Well, you know.
Oh man! Thank you, Brad.
What do you
Dude, thank you, man. Give me a hug, bro. Thank you. That is awesome.
My pant leg is in there.
Oh shit.
Mark's shirt is in there. Seeing the look on Tyler's face after we gifted him the shadow box made me really glad that we could make something good come from a situation that could have been so much worse.
This might be the coolest gift I've ever been given, dude.
It is, and it's got a cool story behind it.
Yeah,
and
man.
You met some new friends.
Yeah.
And you got to hang out with me, and you know, that's badass.
That's the best trip. That's the best treat.
I love the fact that it's coming out because, I want to see it. I think it would be awesome. And, I've told friends and family about it, and it'd be nice to be able to show them or say, hey, watch this. Be able to have the actual story released because, I've read all the rumors and seen all the comments and stuff, and just so much misinformation because no one researches nowadays. No one cares. They get the first little tidbit and they run with it. That's how everything is nowadays. So to have something come out that someone could watch and it'll be simple for them to learn instead of having to do the search themselves, it's going to be kind of nice. Never really thought something like this would pop up in our life, but it's really cool to be able to look back and learn more because our family has always been really quiet. We don't really talk about old stuff. We don't talk. So it's nice to know all this stuff and how big it is for a lot of people. It's fun to be involved.
I guess I would like to stamp our names on it and just say that, yeah, we were, our humble little family that grew up here in Kelso is where it all started. I'd like them to have their claim on it, on the story, I guess, I know it makes my grandma really, she gets really excited talking about it, loves, learning more about her own father, and I don't know, I just definitely want to give them the attention that the credit deserved, She's the reason I'm here, so.
I'm thankful that you reached out to my grandma. None of us would have known about any of this had you not reached out. Maybe eventually, but you gave us the directions to get there, and granted it took us a couple tries, but we found it with your help. So I really appreciate that, and I appreciate you putting all your work into this story. And
Well, I think it's real. I believe their story, yeah. Because everybody, that knew them, knew they were honest, both of them. Why would they leave and be afraid to come back when they were just getting into the gold? Yeah, so they left their equipment up there, and it doesn't make sense, any logical sense, that they wouldn't come back if it was just a crazy story. And then, okay, forget about it, let's go back,
In many ways, Ape Canyon is the perfect example of how people forget history. In less than 100 years, Fred Beck became a myth. The Ape Canyon cabin was gone, and the story of the miners who fought the ape men was nothing but a tall tale. But Marc Myrsell was able to pull it out of that and say, this actually happened. And at the very least, the miners in the cabin were real, that they were working a mine. And that is important. And it is that kind of thing that gets lost because so many of us never take a second look. Over time, people forget. The story doesn't get passed on. People misinterpret the story and distort it until it becomes something else.
If you look at the old little saying of, if you don't pay attention to history, you're doomed to repeat it. Well, it also works with if you're trying to find something or you're trying to understand something, looking back into the history of it provides you with information to move forward.
Marc finding the Ape Canyon cabin, that's just so interesting on so many levels. It was a mine. It hasn't been mined in years. And the fact that they saw an animal and were attacked by an animal, they say Bigfoot or something they didn't recognize. Comparing different stories that we've read about and then our own experiences, it just makes our own experiences much richer.
As a friend, do you think Marc will ever stop looking for Ape Canyon?
Marc will not stop. Marc is driven by the adrenaline of pure rock and roll. It's true. He's always got something on the back burner.
No research project is ever done. I should say no good research project is ever done. Whether it's historical, Bigfoot, chemical geology, any research project worth its salt is ever done. There are times when I think, we're done, that's it, there's nothing else to find. And then 2 or 3 weeks later, there's another lead. Either someone contacts me or I interview someone and there's something else that I can still pursue. No good research project is ever done. That Sunday in 2013, when I came down in the mountain and I was sitting there by the car, how can this possibly be true? How can this possibly be true that I found evidence of what seems to be the Ape Canyon cabin? It seems like a dream. And still today, 11 years later, it still feels like a dream.